On this episode of the Haunted Objects Podcast,
we have some crazy stuff to talk about today.
Yes.
Crazier than pancakes from outer space.
Yes.
There's some conclusions that we're going to come to that I can pretty much guarantee you've never heard in any discussion about Joe Simonton.
Yeah, you're going to go on a journey. Come along with us on this journey. Just trust the process. There's going to be twists. There's going to be turns. There's going to be characters.
There's conspiracies.
There's conspiracy. There's pancakes. There's all sorts of scary named people.
Ventriloquists.
Yes.
Theme parks.
Magicians. Yeah, we're going on a journey.
Yeah.
So get your snacks and your beverages and your pancakes and come along with us.
Fire up your flameless grill.
from deep inside the mysterious archives of the Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal, it's the Haunted Objects Podcast.
You know, there's a rumor that most modern-day UFO encounters and encounters with the occupants inside these craft are actually just an updated version of stories that have been told for a long time.
Yeah.
People's encounters with the Fae.
Faelians, I believe they call them.
Faelians.
Yes.
I love that term.
Yes.
I think that's pretty reasonable. The idea that the folklore, it's always going to change, but the core experience is the same. There are things that are the same. Jacques Vallée was a really big proponent of that idea.
Yes.
Modern UFO sightings were just updated versions of sightings with the good folk, the gentry. And they have a lot of rules.
They really do. They have a ton of rules, and they're all over the place.
What's some of your favorite rules for dealing with the Fae?
My favorite rule is that if you don't want to be bothered by the Fae, you should put your clothing on inside out.
Oh, that's such a good one.
And backwards, I think.
Yeah. Is that just that confuses them?
I think that it's meant to be confusing, and they're kind of like, what is going on over here? And they just sort of leave you alone.
One of my favorites is you're never supposed to eat anything. One of the things that they're always doing is they're luring you into their hills.
Yes.
And then you have such a good time, and they have these big feasts.
Yes.
And there's all this food laid out that looks delicious, but you're never supposed to eat it. Otherwise, you'll never be able to come back home.
You'll be spirited away off to the fairy world.
There's another rule, too. You're never supposed to say thank you.
No, it's rude.
Yeah.
It's really rude to say thank you. I think there are some fairies where it's like they kind of get it, but I think for most of them, you're never supposed to say thank you. I know that house brownies, you never thank them.
Yeah. You're supposed to give them gifts.
Yes, lots of gifts. And
honey and like milk
mead
and bread, stuff like that, but you're never supposed to say thank you.
Yes.
Today we're going to be talking about a guy who broke a bunch of those rules.
Yes.
He had an encounter, broke these rules, and his life was changed forever because of it. And ironically, he changed the course of like UFO encounter stories too.
Yeah, he really did.
The crazy thing is we found information about this case that I don't think most people know of.
I don't think so at all. I have never heard this anywhere else.
It's one of the most famous UFO encounter cases ever. It's a goofy one, but the information we found might rewrite some of UFO history.
I really think so.
Today we're talking about Joe Simonton and the pancakes from outer space.
On April 18, 1961, an ordinary man from the quiet town of Eagle River, Wisconsin, finds himself thrust into one of the most perplexing enigmas in the history of ufology. While washing dishes on a quiet Thursday morning, plumber Joe Simonton hears a strange shriek from the sky. Walking to his backyard to investigate, he witnesses a large silver craft descend from above, its hatch opening to reveal several small men, each with a piercing, almost telepathic gaze. One of the beings motions for water, handing Simonton a metallic jug. He fills the container and, upon handing it to the humanoids, receives a gift in return for small, greasy pancakes. Without a single word exchanged, the craft's hatch closes, shooting back into the sky with an incredible speed. Simonton does what any curious man would. He eats one, describing its bland taste like cardboard. Shortly after Simonton's encounter, 23 of his chickens, all exposed to the shiny chrome craft, mysteriously die, and the United States Air Force steps in to investigate. Just who or what did Joe Simonton encounter at his rural Wisconsin home? Were these beings men from another galaxy? Or were they something even stranger? The answer may truly be out of this world.
All right, we're bending the rules a little bit here because historically in this podcast, we're talking about items that are in the collection, in our museum collection.
Yes.
We have a replica of this in the collection for reasons that we'll get into today. I have it right here. I'm not even joking when I say this is probably the only replica of Joe Simonton's alien pancakes in existence. And if it isn't the only one, it's the best one.
Yeah, it's definitely the first one.
Yeah, for sure. This one, you can look at it. It looks exactly like the one that Joe Simonton is holding in all of the press photos. It was modeled after that. This was given to us by our friend Tyler Strand.
Yes.
Most people might know Tyler Strand from season 2 of Hellier.
Yes.
He's a fantastic artist. He created the goblin that's in the Hellier intro.
He did.
Helped us with the unbinding and making a mold of the crone. Tyler made this completely unbeknownst to us. He just knew that we were really, really big fans of the Joe Simonton space pancake.
He's really aware of what to gift Greg, which is one of the hardest things on the planet. Make sure you gift Greg a tiny, gross-looking scab-like pancake.
Connor doesn't like this. Connor said to me the other day, what is it, tryptophobia?
Well, I think I can't be the only person who feels that way about it. I don't like that.
It's
The
gross.
look with the little holes and stuff. Hate it.
It's pretty creepy to look at.
It's vile.
It looks alien.
Right.
Like it truly does look alien. This is a beautiful rendition of it. We have it in the museum cases. Thank you, Tyler. Shout out Tyler Strand.
Shout out Tyler Strand.
For making this and allowing us the ability to actually talk about this incredible case.
Yes.
I would not recommend eating this one.
No.
We're going to be talking about a guy who ate one of these.
Yeah, I also wouldn't recommend eating one of the real ones.
Yeah, probably not. Once you hear about it. This is made out of Sculpey, I believe it was made out of. But he even presented it to us in the same case.
He did a great job.
That it was preserved in. It's really, really great. This is about the closest I think we're ever going to get to having one of these.
Yes.
Unless we can solve one of the mysteries in today's episode.
Hopefully we can do that. Let's do it today. Let's make that happen for us.
This is what happened out in Eagle River, Wisconsin, April 18th, 1961, at around 11 a.m.
It was probably a beautiful little April day in Wisconsin, in the woods.
The North Woods up in Wisconsin
They're
are
incredible.
beautiful, just so you know.
They're very magical, and they sort of remind me a little bit of Rivendell. So
they do.
It feels very like an elven...
it's great because we're going to be talking about elves.
I mean, it's the perfect place for it. It's one of the most beautiful woods I've seen in a long time. It's gorgeous.
So this is pretty much how this story goes. In the morning, 11 a.m.,
Yeah.
Joe Simonton, plumber,
Yeah.
is finishing up his lunch, and he hears this sound. Just imagine this wild screech.
Yeah.
Joe thinks this is a jet.
Yeah, because apparently that was a sound that was like not uncommon for him to hear every day. So he hears this very, very loud sound as he's walking to his sink to put his dirty dishes in the sink.
Joe hears this screech, thinks this is a jet, and immediately is like, oh, I got to go see what's going on. So he walks to the window and he sees this metal object descend down from the sky almost like an elevator.
Yeah, and he thought at first, he thought that his roof had been blown off. Like he thought his roof had been peeled like a tin can.
Like that scene in the new Top Gun.
Yes.
The roof just comes right off.
Blasted off of his house and was in the process of landing in his backyard.
I mean, that's what paranormal experiences are like.
Yeah.
You don't ever expect it to be something out of otherworldly origin.
No.
Your mind immediately goes like normal thing.
Yes.
I gotta rationalize this.
Stretches to find it.
So he's looking out the window and he sees this silvery object and immediately goes, that must be my roof. But then he realizes, wait a second, my roof is green.
Yeah, it's not silver.
This isn't my roof. So he goes outside to get a better look. And what he sees is this chrome craft glistening in the sun. It's very reflective. It looks like two bowls stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, and it's not landed. It's still floating a little bit above the ground.
Joe explained later that this thing was about 30 feet wide and about 12 feet tall. We were really curious about what this would look like in real life. It's sometimes hard to judge that.
Yeah.
So we went out to a field and we measured what this would look like. We'll show you that image now.
All right, if you're having trouble visualizing what the ship looked like, this is 30 feet in diameter. 2 pi r. This is massive. This could hold like 15 Italians.
So now you know how big this thing was. This is pretty big.
Yeah, it's big enough that your brain probably would turn to mush when you saw it, which is what would have happened to me.
The other interesting detail is that around the middle of it were a series of holes that looked about 6 to 8 inches wide, and Joe assumed these must be some kind of exhaust pipes.
Yeah, because there were sort of like pipes and pipe shapes sort of all around the middle of it.
A hatch has opened on the side of the craft, and is lifted open almost like the trunk of a car.
Yeah.
The cool thing is, he said there were no seams. There's no seams on this thing. So these things kind of came out of nowhere. So with a click, it opens up, and inside is a tiny humanoid man. By tiny, I mean 5 feet tall.
So not that tiny.
Yeah, everybody keeps talking about how little these guys are. They're 5 foot tall, 120 pounds. They're not much smaller than me. It's not that small.
One Keelin-sized man.
One Keelin-sized man.
Of Italian descent.
Italian descent.
That is the description.
Wearing turtlenecks.
This is my favorite detail. Is it was just a little Italian man.
Yes.
And he had a piercing gaze.
Yeah, that's my favorite detail.
Almost disturbed Joe. Like, it made him kind of frightened. He had to look away from his gaze.
Yeah, there was a point where he literally couldn't make eye contact with them because they were too scary.
This man leans out of the hatch, and he sort of like is holding this little silver jug with two handles on either side, and he kind of brings it up to his lips as if to motion like, I need something to drink. Doesn't say anything to Joe. Joe immediately understands what he's asking for, so he reaches up and he grabs this, and he goes to his basement and he fills it up with water. He walks back over to actually hand it back to the little man. He has to stand on his tiptoes, and as he stands on his tiptoes and he hands it to this guy, he sees there are 2 other 5-foot Italian men in the craft who do not acknowledge him at all.
Yeah, they're busy working. They're not interested in what's going on, and they're just doing their own thing. But he can kind of peep them while he's sort of leaning up and looking inside.
These men are also dressed in the same exact uniform.
Yeah.
They have little hats on that almost look like the kind of things that you would wear if you have to wear a helmet.
Yeah, like
right?
a swimming cap kind of.
Yeah, the same kind of deal. So he looks and he sees that one of these guys is using some kind of a black device with buttons on it, almost like it's some kind of a computer screen or something. Doesn't acknowledge him. Then he sees that there's another guy who looks to be cooking something on a flameless grill. The other thing he notices is that these guys are sort of, they're tied to whatever instruments they're using somehow.
Yeah, they had like cords connecting them to the instruments that they were in front of. Almost, I mean, immediately it made me wonder if it had something to do with like the way that the ship would like move around. Maybe it would keep them in place, kind of.
The other interesting thing to note is that he described the inside of the ship as made out of like wrought iron.
Yeah.
It was like a dark iron. So it didn't look the same chrome as the outside.
No, it's such a weird detail too, because you never think of the description. When you think of the descriptions of like the inside of UFOs, you always think of, like you said, chrome, kind of super sterile looking. And this is such a weird, strange detail that it would look like wrought iron.
Yeah.
Or like cast iron even.
Right.
Yeah, weird.
So Joe hands this silvery jug, which looked like it was made out of the same material as the outside of the craft. He hands it to who he assumed was the leader. He assumed this because this guy had the only different thing on his uniform was he had a white stripe that went down the side of his pants. So he thought maybe that is why this guy's the leader. He's the only one that acknowledged Joe at all.
Yeah.
He hands him the water, and then the leader does a very strange salute to him.
Yes.
Where he takes all the tips of his fingers, puts them on his forehead, with his right hand and then just brings it down like that. So if you ever meet an Italian alien, you know how to greet them just like that.
I mean, Italian people are known for speaking with their hands.
You know what's funny?
I was going to say, it's
they
giving,
do this.
I was just about to say.
It is. It's that like real Italian gesture.
Yeah.
Joe is unsure of what to do, so he gives him just like a military salute.
I love this detail. That Joe is a socially awkward person, and it's just Joe is all of us, and he's just trying to get through this experience.
He just doesn't know what else to do.
Yes.
Going along.
Exactly. Let's be real. We would all have done the exact same thing in that moment. We'd have been like, yes, absolutely.
My face in one interview, he goes, because what else am I going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
I go, okay.
So he's looking at these guys. They're wearing uniforms. The interesting thing is they're like turtlenecks and they don't have any visible buttons, no zippers, anything like that. He said that they were about probably 120 pounds, about 25 to 30 years old in his estimation.
Okay.
But they looked like regular humans.
Okay. But had very frighteningly piercing eyes.
Very frightening, piercing eyes.
Yes.
So after he salutes the leader...
Yeah.
He is just standing there while they're like doing their thing, and he's trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm going to try and make conversation with these guys, but they're not talking to me. They're using like hand signals. So he's like, well, that guy over there looks like he's cooking something. So he sort of uses his hand to mime the act of eating, and like kind of was like, he's trying to say, are you eating something? The leader mistakes what he's trying to say and thinks that Joe is hungry, that he's asking for food. So as an exchange, the leader scoops up 4 of these what look like flat, almost burnt pancakes.
Yeah.
And hands them to Joe.
Yeah. They look like scabs, let's be honest.
They kind of do.
They do.
Gross.
And
Yeah.
don't forget that they're greasy.
And they're
they're
greasy.
Greasy.
Joe describes them as they're still hot and they're greasy. And then, without another word, the hatch clicks shut. The craft moves 20 feet up in the air, again, as if it's an elevator. And then it does something really cool. It tilts to a 45-degree angle and blasts super fast to the south. It's so fast and with such force that all of his trees bend back and then snap back to where they were.
Like a slingshot.
Like a
sounds
slingshot.
like.
Joe's standing there with a handful of hot, greasy pancakes
Yeah.
with his mouth open, like just like, what the just happened? And he does what I think any sane person would do in this situation.
No.
Pops one of those pancakes into his mouth
No.
and decides to see what it tastes like.
And it tastes like cardboard.
Joe said it tastes like cardboard. He actually gives an interview later where he says, if this is the kind of stuff that they're eating, no wonder they're small.
Yeah.
Not that small. Not that small.
So small.
Are you consisting on greasy pancakes?
Just hot, greasy pancakes is all I eat.
No wonder she's so small.
There was no damage to the ground.
No.
Unlike many of these cases that you see with like UFO landings, things like that, there's no damage to the ground. They didn't find any radiation. The whole thing lasted only about 5 minutes. The only weird potential collateral damage in this situation is Joe had chickens. 23 of them dropped dead immediately after this event happened.
Yes.
Joe was later tested for radiation poisoning. He didn't have any of that. He didn't have like the moon burn on his eyes. There was not many of the typical things that you see in some of these cases. And it was quick and it was over just like that. And Joe was like, well, I guess that happened. He didn't know what to do other than to go and try and find the one guy in town that he knew was interested in UFOs.
Yeah.
We'll get back to him because it took him a few days to actually find this guy.
It did.
It's one of my favorite stories. It has been for a long time. I think probably most people were introduced to it the same way that I was, which is through Jacques Vallée's Passport to Magonia. Really fantastic book. It's like one of the seminal pieces of high strangeness literature. This book is, it really is a masterclass in looking at new sightings of UFO visitation encounters and relating them to old Fae encounters. The connections are pretty incredible.
They really are, yeah.
One of the things that Jacques Vallée talks about that's interesting about the space pancake is that it lacked salt. There was no salt in this. They were able to do some tests on this, and the original reports said there was no salt. And Jacques ran with this.
Yeah.
And it kind of became, this book became the canonical source for everything we know about the space pancake.
Yeah.
So everything written after that talks about how, well, you know, the gentry, the Fae, they didn't eat things with salt. They had an aversion to salt. Why do you think that is?
Well, salt, I mean, from a magical perspective, salt is often used for protection rituals. It can be used to protect the home. Pretty much all protection rituals will incorporate some kind of salt.
Maybe they had high blood pressure.
Yes.
That's why they were told to stay away. Their doctors warned them against salt.
Their Fae doctors said, stay away from that salt because you're juicy boys and you can't have any
Juicy
salt.
boys. Well, these juicy boys, according to the tests, the initial tests, had no salt in their pancakes.
Yes.
Very interesting because that immediately relates to Fae lore.
Yes, it does.
And everyone kind of ran with it. And so for a long time, people thought that old Joe Simonton had some kind of an encounter with the Fae. And as we've discussed earlier, he broke the rules.
He did break the rules.
And his life may have suffered as a result of that.
Yes.
But he does spend basically all week going around like talking to people about what happened.
Yeah.
The earliest publishing of this story happened on April 23rd, 1961 by the Eau Claire, Wisconsin Leader. That's the Sunday immediately after the encounter on Tuesday.
Okay.
So it took a few days for this to hit the news. The crazy thing is, this news report came across the AP wire. So in 5 days, this story was national for anyone who wanted to run it.
Wow, that's nuts.
Flying saucer crew drops in, shares cakes. So
Straight from the source. And quickly after it happened, too.
yeah, that's true. 5 days. That's not too bad, especially back then. I mean, we're used to like, you know, something going viral immediately.
Sure.
Well, this one went pretty viral for the day. This story starts to spread. You can probably imagine how people responded to it already.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, this local yokel
Yeah.
is telling everybody that aliens served him pancakes in his backyard.
It's pretty great. It's definitely a all over the place story.
He did one TV news article.
I love the fact that there's footage
Yeah.
of him telling the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you'll notice is Joe's story remains pretty consistent. It doesn't get embellished any at all, more than what he's already talking about. He commits to several media interviews. There's a couple radio interviews, but the particular, like the one that's of note, is his video.
Right here is where this flying saucer, this UFO landed. Right here about where I'm standing. I was in my kitchen having a bite of lunch, and I turned around, put the dishes in the sink, and I looked out the window, and that's when I first saw this thing coming straight down, just like an elevator. He was frying these pancakes, if that was their food. God help them, because I took a bite of one of them, and it tasted like a piece of cardboard. And if that's what they lived on, no wonder they're small.
That's a wonderful thing that there's like a pretty immediate news report
documentation
of what happened.
It's neat to see it too. I think like in one of the shots, it looks as if you can still see one of the dead chickens in the background too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it seems like it was pretty close to the moment having happened.
This is sort of when the story goes viral for the time.
Yeah.
We already know it's out on the AP Newswire. He's giving, a video and radio interviews about this. His phone's ringing off the hook at this point. And this is where things start to get a little confusing. The story starts to go in some weird directions, and people start to take some liberties with how they're presenting the story.
Yeah.
What you've heard is directly from Joe.
Yes.
Now, it's out on the Newswire. There's some journalistic telephone happening. The first thing that happens that really bothers Joe is people start to refer to him as a chicken farmer.
Yes. He was a plumber.
He was a plumber, and he was pretty proud of that.
Yeah. He just happened to have chickens.
Right.
Like a lot of people would have at that point in time, especially where he was living. It would make complete sense for him to have a bunch of chickens.
The description of the beings themselves are what get particularly twisted.
Yeah, they do immediately.
Some of the reports The descriptions say that they were olive-colored and they have long black hair. Descriptions of what they were wearing changed pretty radically. Some of them say they have spacesuits. Some of them have blue caps on. Some of them have hats. Some of them don't.
Yeah.
The stripe on the leader's pants becomes red
Yeah.
and not white. Whether the ship actually ever landed. Some say it landed. It didn't. It just hovered in the air. And then the number of beings. Some of them only say that there's one being. Some of them say there were several of them.
Yeah. Some newspaper articles even started by calling them like little green men.
Right. In fact, it was the San Francisco Examiner, and this one happened on March 5th, 62. Flying saucer folk defiant. In case you don't keep up with the wacky world of the flying saucer set, it may come as news to you that the current big flap among them concerns 3 plain pancakes. That's right, pancakes. It seems as how a spaceship from nowhere or other out there landed a couple months ago in the yard of Eagle River, Wisconsin plumber by the name of Joe Simonton. Joe swears, and then this is in parentheses, are plumbers given to pipe dreams? That the little green men who emerged from the saucer were panting with thirst and gave him, in exchange for cold drinking water, 3 cold and somewhat soggy pancakes.
It's like the opposite description of everything
Panting
else.
with thirst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dramatic.
Yeah.
Cold, they were hot. When
Soggy.
they handed them to him. And they gave him 4, not 3.
Yeah.
So, like, even the most basic details are wrong.
Yeah.
One of the cosmic pancakes was sent along finally to the Air Force, which is publicly charged with tracking down reports of unidentified flying objects. It was carefully analyzed by scientists and was turned out to be made from well-known commercial mix of the sort that gives most elderly earthlings indigestion. Not unexpectedly, old Joe Simonton, who's earning more money lecturing on his pancake-making visitors than he ever did plumbing, not true,
Yeah.
we'll get to that, has accused the Air Force of conspiring to hide the real facts. Also not true,
Yeah.
which we'll get to. So you can see immediately.
Yeah. They're not taking it seriously. And because they're not taking it seriously, they're getting all the facts wrong. And they don't really care about that.
Nope.
It doesn't really matter. It's just sort of about, it's like clickbait, basically, is what they're doing. It went viral, and they're writing clickbait articles about it with incorrect information.
When there's a goofy story, journalists unfortunately kind of turn off their journalistic
Right.
integrity meter sometimes, is what we notice. And we even notice it today.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
It's so frustrating. And I mean, imagine you're like a fan of baseball or something, right? And you just know that most of the articles about baseball have errors in them.
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's like, that's what it's like.
Yeah. You can
for
just
us,
assume.
you know?
The Sheboygan Press was also guilty of doing this. This one was a little closer to the event. This one happened on 4/24/61. They reported that he received, quote, 3 cosmic cookies in exchange for a jug of water, but he received 4. And he's only ever gone on record as calling them pancakes.
Yeah. We think it's probably because of how they were being cooked, which would make sense.
Yeah.
That he saw them being cooked on a griddle and like immediately probably just assumed, oh, of course they're pancakes.
Yeah. If you're wondering how we know that we have the facts straight on this, it's because Joe himself was answering questions so much that he actually put out a pamphlet. We have a copy of this pamphlet here. It's just a couple pages. He sold them for $1. I think, what did he sell? 27 of these things or something like that?
That was in one night.
It was in one night.
And that was for people that would kind of come around wanting to see the house and see him. And he was just sort of like, all right, well, you're paying for this.
Yes. So, he's well within his right to do that.
I mean, yeah, people are bugging him all day, of course.
Some contactees make a book. Some contactees go on a lecture tour. But Joe took the pamphlet route, and he would only give it to people who were bothering him about the story.
Yeah.
As an effort to sort of save his breath and get it all marked down in one fell swoop.
It's actually a great point, because a lot of people who have these types of encounters, even if it's as brief as Joe's, they somehow get an entire novel's worth of
Sure, yeah.
work out of this.
Yeah.
But not Joe.
No.
Joe just put the facts down as he knew them. For $1, here's your pamphlet. He probably signed them too, which is kind of cool. God, we got to find one of those. So he was selling these. Connor finds out that he was selling these at least in October of 1961.
It's the earliest that I saw them.
Yeah. Some people, some skeptics, say the fact that he was selling this pamphlet at all is pretty sketchy. The idea that he was trying to make money off of this was pretty sketchy. But consider that the Green Bay Press Gazette on May 3rd, 1961, had this to say about Joe. Joe Simonton couldn't work for 3 weeks following him speaking out about the incident. He said if it happened again, he wouldn't tell anyone. Joe actually lost 3 weeks of work, and specifically what he said were 2 good plumbing jobs because of the amount of attention he was getting. And there were people coming to his house. His phone was ringing off the hook, so even if he was getting a job, he wouldn't know because he didn't want to pick his phone up and talk to one more crank asking him stories about the little green men giving him space cookies.
Yeah, and how common is this specifically for people who have had these kinds of experiences where after the fact, when they do talk about it, they regret having talked about it and think about it in terms of like, oh, I'm just going to be bothered now, or maybe they can't get jobs because it's a strange thing and it weirds people out. So it's kind of an interesting detail that he's experiencing, negative things after kind of talking publicly about this.
The nice thing about this case is it's old enough now that we can look back on it and see what people in the town were saying, what people in Eagle River were saying about Joe before and after the event. And by all accounts, he was just a humble guy.
Yeah.
Didn't seem to even really have any interest in UFOs or anything like that. He lived the rest of his life in Eagle River. No UFO interest. The only real interesting thing about him was the fact that for the local Chamber of Commerce in town every year, he played Santa. That was the only thing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a fun, interesting thing. We notice a lot of tie-ins with the idea of Santa being the green man, the wild man. Kind of strange that's that, but that's it. A lot of people do that. Joe was a simple dude, and he didn't really capitalize on this story the way that most people probably think he would have.
Yeah.
We very recently had the opportunity to visit Eagle River ourselves.
We did.
We were on last fall's speaking tour, and we were doing an event in support of the Rhinelander Public Library.
Yes.
Great event. It was awesome. Rhinelander's a really cool place. It's the home of the Hodag.
Yeah, shout out Hodag.
Even their local school mascots are the Hodag, a mythical creature from local folklore.
Yeah, if you ever go, make sure you look at the mural because they have Hodags playing football, and it's awesome.
They do. This is only, half an hour, 40 minutes away from Eagle River. So while we were there, we both are like, well, we got to go see Joe Simonton's place. We got to go see Eagle River. We got to go have pancakes. We had pancakes.
We did.
Nice.
In Eagle River.
We did.
We didn't tell them what we were in town for.
No, we just came for the pancakes.
Just give me one pancake
one
and then I'll
pancake.
leave.
The reason we wanted one pancake is because we were going to go visit Joe Simonton's grave. And we wanted to leave a pancake on it. Unfortunately, Joe Simonton does not have a headstone.
He doesn't.
Somebody should fix that. We should figure out how to fix that.
Yes.
You can see his plot at the Eagle River Cemetery. You can see it on the map, but there is no headstone. There's just a little square with an S.
Yeah, tiny small marker.
Yeah.
Just marking the spot.
Still very cool to see. We left him a pancake.
We did.
And we went to go find his house. The only way that we could find his house, because it's not public information, was we had heard a story years ago about how a local news reporter for one of the local newspapers reported on the story, loved the story so much that she bought the house from Joe or from his estate when he passed and lived there, until she died very recently. Don't know who owns it now, but that's how we found the directions. It's in the middle of nowhere, still a dirt road.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of neighbors around. Trees are going up real tall.
It's a really thick old forest.
Yeah.
It's kind of a tiny house out in the middle of the forest. Now the houses are closer together, but I assume that in the early 60s, he probably was pretty isolated out there.
Yeah. If there had been a 30-foot craft that was, in his backyard, you probably wouldn't be able to see it because the trees are so tall and it's covered so much.
Yes.
House looks almost the same as it did back then.
It does.
When you look at the photos, it looks the same. But that's it. I think there's people that live there now, and clearly nobody's really talking about it or memorializing it. The town's still pretty rural. There's not a whole lot going on there. Lovely place, though.
It's
I
beautiful.
think we fell in love with Wisconsin being up there. So it was really cool to be able to see this place and visualize how this would have happened. We could see right into the backyard. We can see exactly how this could have happened.
Yep.
How other people may not have noticed it. There are reports that other people actually saw strange things in the sky around the same time. But I think it's to me, it looks very obvious that could have happened without anyone knowing.
I think that's completely true. I mean, like when we were driving past it, you could see that there was enough room for a craft, I guess, to land. It's definitely isolated, even still. And I think it's kind of like the perfect sort of tucked away place for something like that to possibly happen.
Yeah. Here's the big question. So Joe passed away many, many years ago.
Yeah.
The story still remains a mystery. The thing that exists is there's not a whole lot of these types of events that have evidence that they leave behind.
Yeah.
And this case had 4 pieces of evidence.
Yeah.
What happened to those space pancakes?
Yeah.
There were 4 of them. And they each went somewhere.
Yeah.
Connor has tracked down the most up-to-date information about what happened to these pancakes.
Definitively. Information.
And we're going to follow each one of these pancakes. They all end up in some pretty wild places that you might not guess.
They all had side quests for sure.
Let's start with the very first pancake.
When the paranormal lurks in every shadow, and each mysterious artifact hides a ghostly tale, one show dares to uncover the truth. The Haunted Objects Podcast. Now you can wear the mystery. Introducing the official Haunted Objects merchandise. Hats, shirts, pins, and more. All designed by independent artists, manufactured by small businesses, and carrying the undeniable essence of the unexplained. Embrace the legend. Wear the mystery. Visit planetweird.store today.
All right, so pancake number 1 is kind of my favorite pancake. Because Joe just ate it. He just ate it. That was it. It can you think about the idea that like we're all children of the 80s and 90s?
There's one rule that you're taught.
Yes, you don't eat food from strangers, let alone food from aliens.
You don't eat food given to you by the Fae.
Yes.
There's rule number 1, broken.
Yes. He ate food from strange aliens, and I just can't even imagine the idea of eating something like that. But Joe did it for everybody. So that's great. Joe
confirms this
yes.
in the Saucerian Bulletin here.
Yeah.
This is an old Gray Barker production. These are pretty rare. Joe's on the cover of this one.
He is.
And he confirms that he ate one.
Yeah.
He did save a few crumbs that he gave to like journalists and things like that. Can you imagine like having that souvenir?
I mean, God, my thought is like, is there still a real piece of this thing out there in the hands of some family member or something like that? It's got to be still out there.
If you're a member of Joe Simonton's family and you know where there's some of these crumbs, hit us up. We want to know.
We just need a crumb.
We want that in the collection. Put next to this one. So that's the first pancake. It was eaten.
It was eaten.
I got to give it to Joe.
Down the hatch.
That's brave and curious.
Yeah.
So good for you.
Thanks, Joe.
After he eats this pancake, we have pancake number 2. Remember that guy that Joe was really trying to get a hold of in town? The guy that knew a little bit about UFOs?
Yeah.
He ends up getting in touch with this guy, and he gives him one of them. This guy's name was Frank Carter. Frank Carter is an absolutely fascinating individual.
He is.
He was a judge for 42 years in the area.
Yeah, among many things.
But that was just his day job.
Yeah.
He moonlit as a ventriloquist, as a magician, and as a hypnotist. This guy was a jack of all trades. And the best part is, and this is true, he was a card-carrying member of the Brotherhood of Magicians. Oh, we're not supposed to talk about the Brotherhood of Magicians. We did agree.
Yes.
We're not going to get into them this season.
All right, fair enough.
We do have a picture of.
Oh man!
Look at
him.
this
It's
guy.
incredible.
That is Frank. That is Judge Frank Carter with one of his ventriloquist dummies.
Yeah.
I believe they like it. They don't like you calling them dummies. They want you to call them figures.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a note. It's
There
kind of
he
like
is
how
as
magicians
well.
don't want you to say that they're tricks.
They're illusions, Michael.
They're
We have
illusions.
a slightly more normal photo of him as well, but
I don't know.
He still gives the same vibes.
Yeah.
You can tell a magician by the photos they
Yeah.
take, right?
Yeah.
Puffed up tie.
That tie is doing a weird thing
Yeah.
there. What is that?
He's got
Sorry.
wild Lego man hair.
It's a little
right now.
unkempt. I like that though.
It
It's
clicks on.
interesting.
So
He's a character.
he's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
So trustworthy because he's a judge.
Yeah.
You know, he's making some really important decisions.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. We could ask locals what they might have thought about this guy being
Yeah.
a hypnotist and a magician. Anyway, Judge Frank Carter also had an interest in space and UFOs. He was known locally to give these little lectures about things like one of his public presentations that Joe had gone to was called The Battle for the Moon by the U.S. and Russia. Kind of gives you an idea of the time period here. And he also talked about UFOs. Joe learned that Carter was associated with and interested in the subject. That's the reason he sought him out specifically.
Yeah, he was his man. He was like, I got to talk to this guy.
The one guy in town that he knows that's interested.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
who else are you going to reach out to?
Frank Carter even admitted later, he was like, oh, yeah, no, he was trying to get a hold of me all week long.
Yeah.
He tried to see me Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but he found me busy in court. So the reason he couldn't get in touch with his UFO contact is because he was actually busy being a judge. He got a hold of him at 10 or 11 p.m. on Friday night. That's pretty late.
Yeah.
I would never call a judge that late, but that's just me. Carter immediately knows what they should do. They need to send these in to get analyzed.
Yes.
Carter was also a member of NICAP.
Yeah.
NICAP was sort of a hybrid military civilian UFO research organization that formed in the 50s, ran through the 80s. It stands for the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. This was 1961, so it was a little early for NICAP. Their membership peaked, it says here, around the mid-60s. They had about 14,000 members at the time. The thing about NICAP was they had this sort of pseudo-military connection.
Yeah. They were like UFO bros of today.
They were very, serious.
Yes.
They didn't particularly like contactee cases. You know, they thought that things like George Adamski and stuff like that were kind of embarrassing. It wasn't the type of thing that they were interested in. They were interested in the hard science of
Yeah.
the thing. Part of the reason that they were, they presented this air of authority is because they were headed by Major Donald Kehoe, who at the time, we should say, was not active military.
Yeah.
This was sort of his post-career hobby.
Like a passion project, kind of.
He, in the 50s, wrote one of the most seminal books on UFOs called The Flying Saucers Are Real.
That book actually is the book that Betty Hill checked out from the library when she was trying to process what happened to her.
If I recall correctly, it was the only book in her local library about UFOs.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to that. There's a conspiracy brewing
Dang.
that we're going to come back to. So that's who Major Donald Kehoe was.
Okay.
Carter immediately sends it directly to Donald Kehoe, and that's when things start to get a little strange. There's a bit of drama that happens around these space pancakes.
A lot of drama.
Yeah, I guess a lot is better.
lot of drama.
So he does what he thinks he's supposed to do. He sends this letter to Donald Kehoe, Major Donald Kehoe, who's essentially the boss of the UFO investigating group that he's part of.
Yeah.
Thinking this is incredible. We have physical evidence. They're going to get right to this. And he basically spends the next 10 days pacing around waiting for a response. When he doesn't get one, he writes a very strongly worded letter in which he basically says, are you the investigating committee? You're not doing any investigating here. I might as well just not pay my dues and leave this group. You're not paying any attention to me. Well, unbeknownst to him, they actually were dealing with it. It was just They didn't know how to.
Yeah.
And they actually sent him a letter back that's kind of nasty.
Yeah, they were kind of mean, a little bit to the point, but I think that they were pretty skeptical of the situation, and they were sort of telling him, listen, we're a bit skeptical about what's going on here, and it doesn't really feel like it's being covered appropriately.
We don't find out until much later when NICAP dissolves and a lot of their archives become public information that there's actually an internal letter between the lead assistant to Kehoe at NICAP and this guy by the name of Lex Mabane.
Yes.
Great name.
Yeah, possible superhero bad guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Lex Mabane is the chemist that they're talking to who's going to do some research on this thing. And they are basically talking about what a dick they think Carter is.
Yeah, I have a little section here that is so perfect. And so this is in a letter to Lex. My true feelings are that he is a stupid clod. And if his last long ranting letter is any indication of his reasoning ability, I wonder how many innocent people reside in Wisconsin jails. And then he proceeds to write "grrr" with an exclamation point.
That's one of my favorite
It's incredible.
parts of that letter. The other part of this letter too is he says to him, he's writing back to this guy Hall. Lex Mabane is writing back to this guy Hall, and he says, "I shall write to Judge Carter and appraise him that he is off base and has every other word capitalized philippics. What's holding up his pancake analysis is not NICAP prejudice, as he so readily enjoys believing, but the simple fact of human frailty. I suppose he won't believe it. As for returning the specimen, fat chance. He may have the legal right to demand it, but he's not going to get it. I'll tell him it's already out of my hands, which may very well be true soon, and that it's too late to recover it."
And that's where it ends.
That's it.
I mean, I think that's where that pancake goes away.
Lex Mabane probably
Disappears.
throws it in the trash.
Probably out of spite.
Or it's out in his estate somewhere.
Yeah, or he ate it.
We know that Judge Carter never
of
gave
spite.
it back. We know Judge Carter never got it back because he would have told the whole press world
Yes,
about it. Because
yeah.
he told them about everything. Or he would have talked about it at the ventriloquist convention through a dummy or something. But he never got it back, never discussed it again. It just had pure anger. He's even in later articles, like he's interviewed by Gray Barker at one point, and in the interview, he's like, "This was 2 years ago, and they never sent me anything. They just took the pancake. They could have at least sent it back," and et cetera, et cetera. Not realizing that some analysis was done.
Yeah.
They just were so annoyed by him that they didn't tell him about it.
These letters are really fun to read. If you want to read them in full yourself, we'll put them in the show notes because it's a very fun back and forth little radio play almost. Pancake number 3 ends up in the hands of arguably one of the most famous UFO investigators in history.
Yeah.
J. Allen Hynek. Keelin, how does this happen?
The pancake ends up with J. Allen Hynek because J. Allen Hynek, as probably most listeners know, was the lead investigator for Project Blue Book. So, Project Blue Book will give a very brief overview of Project Blue Book. That was the code name for the study of UFOs for the U.S. Air Force. It was from 1952 to 1969. Basically, it was created to determine if UFOs were either a threat to national security and also to scientifically analyze UFO-related data.
It's really famous. I mean, they're to the point of like, we were talking over dinner, and Carl said, "I feel like Blue Book is the second thing that people hear about with UFOs."
Yeah.
If they do any little bit of digging on their interest, they come up with Project Blue Book.
Yeah, it's a real-life X-Files.
It's exactly how it was portrayed.
Yes.
I mean, J. Allen Hynek, because of his work, ended up in a cameo in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, like arguably the UFO film masterpiece. So this guy consulted on Close Encounters. They even made a television show all about his exploits. Well, it's got like a 69% on Rotten Tomatoes. Nice.
They got all the monsters wrong, though.
They did. So here's the thing. I thought that the show was cool. I thought it was going to be like an X-Files type revival, but they like f***ed up all the monsters.
Yeah, they did. They did big time.
They kind of like talked down to rural people, which I'm noticing is a
Common
theme
theme here.
with UFO investigators. You know, the Hopkinsville Goblin case, I think for reasons we can all assume. I was offended in how they handled that because they did the goblins dirty. They said that they were just like escaped circus monkeys.
No.
They also
You have an interest in goblins?
Yeah, I know. I should talk about that once in a while.
Yeah.
They also screwed up the representation of the Flatwoods monster.
Yeah, they made it scary.
And they said it was an owl. And listen, as a guy who figured out what the Flatwoods monster really was, they did a terrible job explaining it in a skeptical sense.
You know what the Flatwoods monster is?
I know what it is. I'll tell you off air. It'll be a great podcast episode someday. If you all bother me enough about it in the comments, maybe we'll do it.
Do it.
The other cool thing about that show is it starred Aidan Gillen, I think is his name. He was Littlefinger in
Game of Thrones.
He was great. And the show only lasted 2 seasons. And we bought a ton of the props.
Yeah.
I have right here next to me, since I knew we were going to talk about Project Blue Book, there's a hat box and it says 1. So this was an important one. 1 Hynek brown fedora. If I open this box up,
We're going to get some ASMR sounds, too.
here it is. This was on Aidan Gillen's head during the show.
Can I have the other one?
Yeah, you want the other one?
Yeah.
Won't fit over my headphones, but
The letter said that it was like the promo art one.
Yeah.
yeah, these are what was actually, if you've seen photos of the Project Blue Book key art, these are what he wore in them.
There.
You guys look
Does that look
way
cool?
cooler than he
Wow,
did.
guys.
Yeah.
I mean, fedoras are historically the coolest hat.
There we go.
There you go, Dana.
welcome.
Got it on there.
I also have, look at this. I have one of Hynek's pipes. This actually has,
Ooh.
it has Aidan Gillen's teeth marks.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah.
Let's
And-
clone him.
It was actually, this tells you how big Project Blue Book was. Here's one of the chair backs. Robert Zemeckis was the executive producer on this.
Okay.
We have tons and tons of stuff. Newspaper articles, sitting right next to you is all like the scripts. We bought a ton of stuff.
We're going to title this episode Robert Zemeckis Back Sweat. It's real.
Ew.
Fortunately, the show only lasted 2 seasons. The actual Project Blue Book lasted a lot longer than that.
Yeah, the actual Project Blue Book had over 12,000 sightings that they investigated.
Jeez.
And still, like, to this day, 701 of them remain unidentified.
So they actually solved like 11,000 cases out of 12,000.
Yeah.
That's a pretty great
It's way more than
record.
the X-Files.
I think we've solved at least 11 cases in our work.
Yeah, that's probably true.
That's pretty good.
They basically decided to discontinue it because it was going on for a long time and it took a lot of money.
I think part of the reason too was that eventually Hynek started to believe in some of the cases that he was investigating.
They were
Yeah.
like, oh, he's being indoctrinated. Oh, no.
Because wasn't the reason that they hired him is because he was an astronomer, he was like very smart, and he was very skeptical of UFOs?
Yeah, it's funny, too, because it makes me think of in the pilot of the X-Files, when Scully's hired, that's what she's hired to do, is
Oh,
to,
yeah.
to debunk Mulder. That was her
Yeah.
whole job, was just to debunk Mulder.
The Air Force basically wanted a serious academic
Yeah.
to go out there and scientifically poo-poo
Yeah.
every UFO sighting. And,
Yeah.
and he was doing a great job, clearly, by his
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty good statistics there.
But
Yeah.
I think eventually he started to believe some of these cases, and he was taking the witness reports a lot more seriously than he had before,
Yeah.
and noticing patterns that were emerging. And I think that frustrated the Air Force.
Sure.
And that was probably a big reason why they pulled the plug.
The mandate of Project Blue Book was more so to debunk things than actually investigate them.
Right.
And he had very strong opinions about that. But at the end of the day, he had this position and it was allowing him to get these stories and this data that he was genuinely interested in at this point. And so he stayed until Project Blue Book dissolved.
And you said he was still an astronomy professor.
Yeah,
that
throughout the entire
time.
thing, he was still an astronomy
At,
professor.
Ohio State?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Is that the one where you go, the Ohio State?
The
Or is that the wrong one?
I don't know. I didn't go to college, so I don't know anything about them.
We just live in Ohio.
I mean, he sounds kind of like the Indiana Jones of UFOs in that way. Can you imagine? Your lecturer is jumping on planes and investigating cases of UFO sightings.
It's badass.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And one of the funniest things I read was because he was invited to join one of the preceding programs from Project Blue Book, Project Sign first. And part of the quote was him saying that these guys from the Air Force came in and asked him to be a consultant. And he said, the job didn't seem as though it would take too much time, so I agreed.
And that was 1947?
Yeah.
I think it's safe to assume that that was because of Roswell.
Yeah.
Roswell would have probably caused them to reach out to him because they had to start taking this stuff seriously and debunking it as fast as they could.
And he ended up not liking the mandate of disapproval.
Yeah, and then, everything wasn't declassified until much later into like the 80s, I think.
That's important. Remember that detail. The Blue Book information is now available via the Freedom of Information Act. You can find all of their files through that. It says here that from the National Archives, the records include approximately 2 cubic feet of unarranged project or administrative files and 37 cubic feet of case files in which individual sightings are arranged chronologically. That's kind of crazy. A cubic foot of those records comprises about 2,000 pages, and those records take up more space than the UFO that landed in Simonton's yard.
Yeah. I love that they had to measure it by cubic feet. That was the best way to do it.
But what is within those papers is the story of our friend Joe Simonton and his encounter with J. Allen Hynek, which is actually a very exciting tale.
Major Robert Friend, who is the current director of Project Blue Book, got a call from our friend Judge Carter, and he told him about these space pancakes, and he also told him that he had sent the pancake to NICAP. And so Major Friend was like, NICAP is going to make a huge deal out of this. So to try and get ahead of that, he sent Hynek and 2 astronomy grad students to Wisconsin to go investigate. By the time they found Simonton and got him back to his home, they started investigating the yard. One of the things that they noticed was that there were some broken branches in his yard, and Simonton could have lied and said this was part of the UFO incident, but he's like, no, it was just the snowplow.
And this was just a few days after the event, right?
About a week.
It was about a week after the event, and they saw these branches on the ground, and Simonton was like, no, that was from a storm.
Yeah, he was really honest about it, which I think says a lot about him as a person. We get a bit of character there in that moment where we can kind of go, he could have just, said it was the UFO. Why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
But he was really honest, and I think that says a lot about him as a person.
Yeah, that's a great point.
He has a few things that are going for his credibility and his honesty over and over again.
Yeah.
And he never changed his story.
Yeah.
I think the fact that he doesn't change his story, the fact that he was very honest about those branches, it seems to me like the characterization of Simonton is that it never would have even occurred to him to make this up or lie about it.
Yeah, it's so out of character for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the other interesting moments that Hynek had was when one of the grad students that he brought with him went to go see and talk to Judge Carter. Carter would not let him in the house because he thought this grad student was associated with the Air Force. He thought he was a military man.
Oh, man.
ICAP doesn't trust the
they
Air
don't
Force.
Trust the Air Force.
Which is weird because Kehoe is the head of NICAP.
Yeah.
But the Air Force was allegedly trying to silence the UFO issue.
So weird.
At that time. And that's what, I guess that was what Judge Carter's opinion was.
Yeah.
Man. Mysterious knock on the door in the nighttime.
Yeah. And it's just this poor grad student.
I love it.
Simonton also had received a lot of letters from people presumably connected with NICAP, basically telling him not to trust the military and the Air Force. And because of that, when Hynek was trying to interview him, he's not really willing to open up to him very much. And so Simonton was asking him, what's your opinion on NICAP? And, how do you feel about those guys? And Hynek was very careful to only say positive things about NICAP, and that tactic actually worked because by the time he left Wisconsin, he left with a space pancake.
Wow. He got one.
He got that cake, secured the package.
So now we've got one of them in Joe's tummy, one of them with the NICAP, because it was sent there by Judge Carter, and it's in a lab in New York, and nobody's getting it back.
With Lex Mabane.
Yeah, evil villain Lex Mabane.
And then a third one is in the hands of on ufology Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
J. Allen Hynek has it, and he gets on a little biplane in northern Wisconsin.
And because it was Project Blue Book, we know that ends up with the Air Force.
Yes.
Get this. We know that one of them still exists because it is in the collection of the National Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base right up the road in Dayton. When I found this out, I immediately am like, we got to go. We got to go to this Air Force Museum. I went with Connor once, and we asked about it when we were there. And they roll their eyes.
Yeah, they did.
They don't want anything to do. It's very weird to me, considering UFOs are so hot right now.
Yeah.
They didn't want to answer it. They've got these like old military Air Force volunteers. Didn't care. I went another time with Tyler, and I asked a guy, and this guy still, he was kind of rolled his eyes at us, but he was like, I do remember something like that now that you mention it. We used to have a Blue Book display where we talked about UFOs, and I think they had it on display. But of course, I ask, where is it? He's like, oh, I don't know. But he said, it has been a long, long time. Why don't you email our head curator? And he gives me the information. So I come home, I sit down, and I send an email. It took a little while, but I get an email back, and it has a new photo that was taken by the curator of the pancake in their archives. And he says that this pancake was on display. He gives me the catalog number and everything.
There's the old display.
There's the old display with the pancake. You can see there's actually 2 on there, and we don't know if that was because they were broken in half for testing or whatever, or if it just, it's old and brittle. But that's one of them. That was the one that was given to Allen Hynek, to J. Allen Hynek. It hasn't been on display, at least according to their curator, for at least a decade. So it's just sitting there. I know it's there. He sent me a brand new cell phone photo of this thing, pulling it out of the archives. I've emailed him so many times saying, can we please come and see this thing? And I've gotten no response. So I don't think they want to take it very seriously or give it much attention.
Show me them cakes.
Seriously. Yeah. Connor even thinks he tracked down the exact building that it's kept in, Building 5, Area B.
Went a little overboard.
So if anyone's planning a heist, Building 5, Area B. Fun fact,
allegedly,
though, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is where all the Roswell stuff was supposed to be stored. Maybe in the same building?
Possibly Building 7.
Yeah, that's
Area C.
Connor just has a mental map of this entire museum.
Don't worry about it. If there's a heist, it was not me.
So we know that at least one of them still exists.
Yeah.
Whether or not anyone will ever get to see it again, we don't know. But we know it exists, and we have modern images of it to know that it's still there, protected in the archives of the Air Force Museum.
Yes.
So we're left with one more mysterious pancake. Where did this pancake go? Well, according to Connor's research, Simonton kept it.
This one was last seen years and years ago by a journalist in a glass jar in Joe's home.
Oh, I love it.
He had one, he kept one, and he did not let go of it. Even for years after the incident, people reported anytime there was a fun little personal interest story on Joe Simonton, he would show them the pancake.
Didn't he even let a few people take little nibbles of it?
He let a few people take little nibbles of it. He gave them little samples. He gave them just a little bit. we have a quote from a journalist from an article that came out years after the incident. What does it say?
This is from 1995. It's by Harold Bud Meyer. The title of this article was Joe and I Ate UFO Pancakes.
It's the best title I've ever heard.
So he says, Simonton brought the pancake out in a glass jar on top of tissue-like paper. It was full of perforations, distinct and perfect like a punch. Had a slight rancid odor.
It's giving Bigfoot pheromones.
It is.
Yes.
Same kind of jar. During my interview with Joe, he gave me part of one of them. Nibbling on a corner of it, I found nothing alarming about it, nor did I suffer any ill effects, although I agreed with Joe that it tasted very much like cardboard.
Great.
That is one of the lost pancakes.
Yeah.
That is absolutely making me think of you going to elf school. Did those
Oh my God, I didn't even think about that.
You had pancakes when you went to elf school. Did they taste like cardboard?
No, they were actually delicious.
Oh, okay.
Dane and I, just a little backstory here. We visited Iceland not too long ago, and while I was there, I immediately knew I need to go to elf school. They actually have an elf school there.
Yeah.
There's even still in politics, if there is a politician who does not believe in the elves of Iceland, they're usually not elected.
Yeah.
People there, they maintain a belief in elves, and they have a whole school there. The headmaster's name is Magnus. And Magnus...
Shout out Magnus.
Actually, we sat down for 3 hours, and he taught us all about the elves, and then we ate pancakes that were from a recipe given to a woman by the elves.
That's so cool.
So there's an actual recipe from Iceland, from folklore, about how to make pancakes given to you by elves.
That's awesome.
It's
elf
good that
pancakes.
you have your diploma. Can I stand up and read your diplomas?
Please do. I have it hanging on the wall here in the museum.
Yeah, he hangs them on the wall. Sometimes I see. Let's see. Greg has a degree in elves and hidden people research studies
That's right.
from the Icelandic Elf School.
And here I said I didn't go to college.
You did. You went to
Yes.
elf school.
A diploma from the Crustacean College of Sea Monkey Knowledge.
That is true. It is true.
And he's an ordained minister from Universal Life Church Ministry.
That's a good mix there.
Listen, I'm a professional, okay? But it's funny. I did forget all about the pancakes in elf school.
At least they tasted better.
You may not learn much, but you will get a kick-ass diploma. We're going on the road.
Woo-woo!
Our all-new Haunted Objects live tour is haunting 30 cities across the country, and we aren't just sharing never-before-seen evidence from our spookiest case files. We're asking you for your help in our craziest paranormal experiment yet.
Come and learn why the infamous Dybbuk box is scarier than the demon it's rumored to imprison.
Tag along with us as we reveal how we broke the curse of the Catskills crone.
And learn the shocking truth about ghosts with an experiment that you'll never forget.
Plus, VIP ticket holders get a very special induction into our very real and very serious secret society.
The Sacred Order of the Haunted Object.
All this and more surprises await you when Haunted Objects Live comes to your town.
But don't wait too long, because tickets are already starting to sell out, and we're not taking this show on the road again.
Visit newkirktour.com for tickets and dates, and we'll see you
on... You gotta wait for me.
You came in like half a second. And we'll see you on the road.
We've reached the point in the episode where it's time to put on our skeptic hats. If only we had hats that said skeptic on them. We'll have to figure that out. Put your skeptic hat on.
Okay.
And let's try and figure this mystery out.
Dana's is a big one. It's a big hat.
Cowboy.
Oh, it's got
Oh,
straps.
Oh, it's got a chin strap.
Safety first, folks.
Skeptic helmet.
Yep.
All right, let's try and figure this out. Let's put our skeptic hats on. We've reached that point in the episode. And let's try and figure out this mystery from a skeptical perspective, okay? The first thing we got to look at are Joe's accounts. He's never changed his story. That's something to keep in mind. Never changed his story. Stuff about the trees bending, the stuff about the roof, his willingness to give the pancakes up for tests. Those are all a big deal. I mean, he doesn't seem like he has an agenda,
No,
right?
yeah.
I think that's something most people who actually research this can agree on. Doesn't seem like he has any real reason to lie about this stuff. So none of the investigators in this case have thought that Joe Simonton was lying or hoaxing anything.
Yeah.
That said, they do think that they have an explanation for this. Whether or not this is a believable explanation to anybody, I mean, we'll leave that up to you. They believe that he was having a waking dream. Hynek has a quote here. From the appearance of the man, his habits for life, and his evident loneliness, it would appear to me that the situation was ripe for suggestibility and mental aberration. The presence of the NICAP judge in the picture probably accounts in large part for the embellishment of the story and the publicity it has attained. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That he would just be like, yeah, no, the guy's lonely.
Yeah.
He probably had a dream and he believed it. The point that's funny is that he's saying that it was the judge that got him all whipped up and made this a much bigger deal than it should have been.
He made as if he maybe told the judge about a weird dream and then extended it or had a full-on hallucination. I don't know.
It's kind of a bummer, though, because it really sort of discounts this man's experience by just saying, like, oh, well, he clearly was, like, influenced by all the people around him. It's kind of a bummer.
We have another document here.
Yeah, it's the Blue Book card.
Oh, yeah. There's the Blue Book card. We'll put that on screen if you're watching the video podcast. The Blue Book card here literally labels it as a hallucination.
Yeah.
It seems kind of unfair to me.
Yeah, I mean...
Granted, I believe in weird stuff, but hallucination?
There were physical objects that were obtained from this. So, I mean, it would be pretty... extensive hallucination. He'd be like making pancakes while in a fugue state or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a lot.
And he clearly didn't know how to make them.
Yeah.
If that's the case, he didn't know what he was doing. Like, everybody knows how to make pancakes. They're kind of hard to screw up.
Yeah.
People said he wasn't much of a drinker either. So that's working for
Fascinating.
him as well.
There's another quote here. This is from page 26 of a QFOS document. It says the Air Force Aeronautical Systems Division psychiatrist believed Simonton had suffered a hallucination and subsequent delusion. The Air Technical Intelligence Center investigator said, quote, experiences of this type, hallucinations followed by delusion, are not at all uncommon and especially in rural communities. That's kind of offensive, I think. I'm someone who's from a rural community. I grew up in a place that's not too unlike Eagle River, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
People don't just wander around hallucinating shit all the time.
Exactly.
It's just, they don't live the same life as people in Dayton, Ohio. But they're not hallucinating.
No.
Most people there they're pretty honest people.
Yeah, it feels like a very easy, sort of cheap way to discount someone.
Yeah, and you see that a lot. We've mentioned that before. A lot of these types of reports, if somebody is from a rural community, people just automatically assume they're dumb or something. And that's not really the case.
No.
No, and you know what this shows is that the Air Force could not refuse Joe's sincere honesty.
Yeah.
Yes.
And his salt of the earth ways.
They had to go out of their way to come up with an equally crazy explanation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, that a man hallucinated a UFO experience and while doing that has no memory of making 4 tiny burnt pancakes.
Are we being bad skeptics right now?
I mean, I think
we should.
I think we're being good skeptics, actually.
I think so.
Because I think we're actually being skeptical of a really ridiculous explanation.
Being skeptical of the skeptics.
Right.
But what do we also have? Real life evidence.
We do.
Of these pancakes.
Yeah.
As we've stated multiple times throughout this podcast, they have actually tested these. One of them, these tests, seems to have gotten a lot more publicity than the rest. Keep in mind, some of this stuff was not declassified until Project Blue Book was closed, and this information was received through the Freedom of Information Act.
Yes.
We're going to go through some of these tests. Connor, you're a very analytical guy. What were these things made out of?
Each of the tests had slightly different results because they were slightly different tests. There were 3 tests done that are larger public knowledge, and there's another one that I found too. Test number 1 is the test that NICAP ran on Judge Carter's sample. Carter sends one in, they sent it to Lex Mabane, and Lex actually did do some initial testing on the pancake. Now, what he saw, he tested isotopes, he tested for radiation, what he looked for, and saw the age of the materials in the pancake, and also the level of radiation. It's my understanding that he was doing it to see if these materials came from somewhere that had oddly radiated qualities, potentially marking that their creation happened a certain distance from a sun. As in, they're from outer space somewhere else.
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
That isn't here. And what he found was everything matched up normally, and the materials would have been organically created. They were organic within the last 10 years, and really didn't find any odd readings on radiation or anything like that. So essentially what we have from Lex's test is, all right, that's all I can do right now. If you want more testing done, that's going to be $280 is what he told Kehoe and Hall at NICAP. That's like $3,000 in today's money.
Yeah, that's not cheap.
And they were kind of floundering for cash at that point. I mean, they're basically selling magazine articles, not a lot.
In one of the earlier letters that we read, the internal letters, they're talking to each other. Hall and Mabane are talking to each other, talking about how NICAP is almost bankrupt.
Yeah, that's floundering.
So they don't have $3,000.
So not only are they not taking the case seriously, and they're being raked over the coals, as they said, by this judge in rural Wisconsin publicly, but they also don't really care, and they don't have money to do it. So point is, that's the end of what we find out from Lexus. Remember, there's another sample given to J. Allen Hynek. J. Allen Hynek gave his sample. I believe he either split it in half and gave it to two different people, or Joe did have a secret Air Force meeting and he gave them some and Hynek some. At the end of the day, the point is, Hynek sent one test over to the FDA. Now, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, did do a test and publicly announced their results. They were much more like, get this in the papers. What they said is that this Food and Drug Administration report, the pancakes are made of fat, starch, buckwheat hulls, wheat bran, and soybean hulls. The biological and radioactivity measurements were consistent with an ordinary pancake of terrestrial origin.
Such a great line.
that's the report from the FDA that was public way back in the day. Now, notice what is not said in that reading from the FDA. They don't mention salt.
This comes right back to Passport to Magonia. This is a holy grail when it comes to information about high strangeness in paranormal and UFO cases. To reiterate, what Jacques Vallée says in this book was written, when did this come out? This came out in
69.
Nice. This came out in 1969. And he notes how interesting it is that this man was delivered food from people from another planet, ostensibly another world, and this food lacked salt. This is what he says about it.
For it is well known in Ireland that if you are taken away by the fairies, you must never taste food in their palace. Otherwise, you never come back. You become one of them. It is interesting that the analysis performed by the Air Force did not mention the presence of salt in the pancakes given to Simonton. Indeed, Wentz was told by an Irishman who was quite familiar with the gentry, Irish fairies, that, quote, they never taste anything salt, but eat fresh meat and drink pure water.
So that is really the mention that becomes a really big deal. People mention it for a long time. It's mentioned in more recent books by our friend Joshua Cutchin, who does fantastic readings on fairies as well, citing Jacques Vallée, saying something kind of similar. He talks about the Onerbonski. That's probably incorrect pronunciation. It's a race of dwarves native to the Netherlands, prone to stealing young girls and children. They have a gentler side, however, and they are known for helping in building, construction, and assisting the farms in the field by bringing them fresh water to drink and pancakes to eat.
Wow.
I love that.
So there is that Netherland, Iceland, some sort of connection with pancakes and fairies too.
So it's strange that this guy who knows nothing about those legends, doesn't care about UFOs, just kind of hanging out in the Northwoods in Wisconsin, is met by little men in a spacecraft who cook him pancakes, and they don't have any salt in them. For a very obvious reason, Jacques Vallée includes that in this book. If you've read it before, you already know that it's just comparisons between old Fae folklore and modern UFO sightings, at least back in the 60s.
Jacques was the forefront of taking the UFO story and turning it more into a Fae folk story and finding all those ancient connections that we just called them UFO occupants.
Yep.
But back in the day, they were the Fae, in essence, is his hypothesis. Now, that's a natural conclusion that he reached. That's not bad science. That is what the report said from the FDA. The thing is, there was a second test done.
Stunning information
that nobody knew about for a long time. That was done by the other Air Force group that took whatever it was. Either maybe a little sample from Joe or the other half of the Hynek pancake. I'm prone to believe that the Hynek pancake was cut in two because you remember in that Dayton museum, there were two halves there.
Yeah.
Yep.
One half had a test done by the Aeronautical Systems Division of the Air Force Systems Command. They reported that these pancakes were prepared. They did a full analysis of the ingredients as well. They went deeper. The pancakes were prepared from a low-protein flour with small quantities of sugar and salt. It has been cooked in a hydrogenated oil. So there you have the salt.
They're not elves.
Bombshell.
They're not fairies. There was salt in the pancakes.
Salt was in there.
For the entire time I've known this story, I never knew that there was actually salt in the pancakes.
So what would be the reasoning for that piece of information not being privy to the general public?
What happened was this was all internal documents and internal testing that was done within like not only Project Blue Book, but sort of that Air Force of the time period.
Yeah.
The other one was sent to the FDA, and the FDA is a public organization, and they were very forward of just being like, hey, this is what's in them. And the FDA is the one who sort of made the announcement. These guys did not. So this didn't come public. The first time I saw it mentioned was in the 90s, but it does mention salt. By then, the ship had sailed. I mean, I think there's like literally an entire Ancient Aliens episode about like the saltless pancakes, and that sort of thing.
And it's all Jacques Vallée's fault.
No.
We still love you, Jacques. Please don't hate us.
And then, do you remember as another nail in the coffin? Do you remember how that journalist got a little sliver of the pancake and he wrote about testing it with Joe? He took another bit of his piece of pancake and he had it tested at the University of Minnesota. This is what he said. Back in St. Paul, I took my part of the pancake to a food testing laboratory at the University of Minnesota. There, amidst much laughter, an assay was run with findings similar to those received by Dr. Hynek from the federal laboratory. There were indications of a common grain, not unlike hard durum wheat. It was made with some kind of fat and a dash of NaCl, also known as common table salt.
Boom.
Man.
Incredible.
So we got a couple legit reports of that there's salt in these pancakes.
Yeah. There's salt in these pancakes, folks.
Let me tell you, a lot of people are going to have to put out a new edition of their books.
Yeah, I mean,
because this became quoted. It was the canonical source for so many of these stories about the saltless pancakes.
I mean, the story of the pancakes is pretty much followed up immediately by people saying, and there was no salt in them.
Yeah.
It's like the thing that people say about the pancakes.
Well, here's the thing. If these things, they're of terrestrial origin, right? We should be able to reproduce them. Tyler did a really fantastic job reproducing it in a form that we could keep in a cabinet in the museum.
Sure, it probably tastes exactly the same if you eat it.
It does, probably.
As the original pancakes.
But get this. There was a woman who did some tests and then sent them into Gray Barker. She actually has a recipe, and you can create these pancakes exactly the same way. This unnamed woman wrote to Gray Barker saying that they were cornmeal, flour, sugar, and water, if sparingly distributed on a very hot griddle in a shallow pool of oil or grease, yielded a small, thick, leathery, very brown and perforated pancake. So we decided, let's see if we can make some and test these pancakes for ourselves.
Welcome to the Space Kitchen. My name is Gucci.
I'm Alfredo.
And we are from the Planet Lamborghini. We're going to begin by mixing our ingredients. Alfredo, if you don't mind.
Do the dry ingredients first.
While Alfredo mixes, go ahead and make our pool of oil. Okay, good. You want to observe it as if you're observing a human being while they sleep in bed at night.
Well, they cook in a small pool of grease.
These actually look better
They
than
look
his.
way better than his.
Why?
No, I think that yours is too thick.
I'm just gonna go ahead and thin it right out.
That's too much. Oh no!
It's kind of working. It did look like scabs, right?
Oh!
Greetings.
Greetings.
Welcome to the Space Pancake Kitchen. There's something still not quite right about this mix.
This is.
Whoa, that's
I mean,
getting
it's
there,
starting
man.
to look a little.
And then we'll
See
just
that?
add water.
See that? That was like the movie with Tom Cruise called Cocktail.
We're planning on opening a theme park,
People will be interested in spacefaring beings.
but we just have a guy. Do you think this needs more sugar? Is that
This
what causes the
literally,
holes
This
in
looks
it?
like a Bigfoot.
I don't know, man. It's pretty close.
No.
It's pretty close. That looks pretty good.
This is gross. Okay, there's lots of bubbles. Ready? Yes.
We're
We're making
space
pancakes.
I'm gonna pour them from high up so they've got, well, because I want them to have bubbles. I don't know, man. This one doesn't have baking soda.
It didn't do anything.
God damn it. I think there's like a weird air pressure, do you?
Well, it probably didn't happen, so.
I believe we have achieved our stated goal. A selection of half a dozen space pancakes. I think the one that looks closest to Joe's might be this one here. This one's pretty close. Not enough bubbles, that's the thing. There's not enough holes. It doesn't give you that tryptophobia. Not too bad, not too bad. Bon appetit.
It tastes like a potato chip. Oh my god. That's just pure grease.
It's not good.
Do you wish you could have weekly episodes of the Haunted Objects podcast? If so, you're in luck because we just launched Museum Mailbag, a companion show where we dive deep into previous episodes' topics, answer your questions about the unexplained, and reveal the secrets of the universe.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. The only way to get the show is to become a member of the Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal. Becoming a member doesn't just support the show, it also gives you access to monthly live-streamed adventures and experiments with us.
And a magical monthly subscription box with live classes about the occult and witchcraft with me.
Plus, you'll get downloadable goodies, exclusive merch, and more.
To join the museum and get your weekly dose of the Haunted Objects podcast and so much more, join us at patreon.com/paramuseum.
Okay, are you guys ready for this?
Ba-bow.
We've been building up to this the whole episode. This is one of the explanations that I've never heard before now.
No, never, ever, ever.
I don't think most people who are going to hear this have ever heard this explanation, even if they're fans of Joe Simonton's space pancake story. Connor did some digging,
Yeah.
as he's known to do, and he found what seemed like the only couple references to this explanation, which has direct first-hand accounts of what potentially happened that made Joe Simonton believe he had been visited by extraterrestrials, and it is bonkers.
It just makes the story weirder. It gets weirder.
We also may have a connection here that makes this an even vaster conspiracy that I don't think anyone's put together yet, that ties back into season 1.
In 1961, in the area of Rhinelander, Wisconsin, right outside of Eagle River where Joe was, 1961 is the same year of Joe's encounter. Harry Pride, who was a local real estate agent, he was on the town development corps. He was one of those just like town chamber of commerce guys. purchased land with his friend John Morley, and it was a dairy farm and surrounding acreage. It was something like 400 acres in Rhinelander to build what was basically his friend John's childhood dream of owning his own amusement park. And they did this. They bought it and they developed it. This was actually fairly common, is my understanding, in the early 60s because people were trying to copy Disneyland's level of success.
Sure.
Right.
The thing is these dudes in Wisconsin didn't have Walt Disney's money. And so that's fine. Good for them. They had a dream. They're trying. It had like an Old West area and a fairy tale area, and they actually built it. The entire park was roughly 12 buildings. Not huge.
Exactly like Disney.
One of them was just a big shoe.
Yeah, one of them
true.
was a shoe shaped. In fairy tale land, we have some pictures as well on the screen. The thing is, they might need to drum up some interest in this amusement park.
My God, this is crazy.
And the idea is that they may have just concocted a scheme in order to do that. In the September 1961 APRO Bulletin, which I believe is the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, one of many organizations in the 50s and 60s that existed and kept track of reports. In the 1961 APRO Bulletin, there's an article where a very salacious explanation appears for what could have happened to Joe Simonton. And remember, this is about 6 months after the incident occurred. Comes from a woman named Cecilia Hess. And Greg has the article right there.
It's called A Re-Examination of the Simonton Case. I'm going to skip to the second half of this article because that's where all the juicy stuff is. The most recent information to come to our attention concerning the Simonton case, we will quote directly from member Cecile Hess of Rhinelander. It is self-explanatory. So this comes from a NICAP member about 25 miles away from Eagle River. 2 weeks ago last night, about 28th of February, Harry Pride, an Eagle River real estate broker, came and sat down next to me in the lounge during our coffee break and asked me what I thought of their advertising stunt. It turned out that he was referring to the Simonton affair. He then proceeded to tell me that he and some friends got Joe drunk and then hypnotized him. He said they had him tell the story 29 times while under hypnosis. I called up Ray Palmer, the editor of Flying Saucers out of Amherst, Wisconsin, that week, and I asked him what he thought about it. He told me he thought Joe had had a psychic experience, that possibly they enlarged on it. He also said that if the hypnotic part of the story was true, that those who did it may have thought that they were doing their patriotic duty, as much as to say that someone had approached them and given them the idea, possibly hinting to them that they might find a use for it in their business. In this case, it was the promotion of Treasure Island, an imitation in miniature of Disneyland if it ever gets underway. Incidentally, they built a little cabin on this amusement ground where Joe is going to sit and tell his story. I met Joe last August at Judge Carter's summer home. If I ever saw a sincere and honest man, it was him. A person had to understand a bit about hypnotism to realize how this could be, and I'm one of those who do know the possibilities inherent in it. A week ago, Harry Pride denied his original story and said Joe suffered from hallucinations and they just used hypnosis to make him tell the story the same each time. I tried to get more out of him last night, but he wasn't talking. Unquote.
So essentially, it's insane.
So weird.
The idea is that they wanted to promote their theme park and have Joe as like a sideshow act and sit there and tell his weird story about space pancakes. But did you notice another detail in there? They're not saying that it was Harry Pride's idea.
Yeah.
Remember, he's the owner and real estate developer for the amusement park.
Yeah.
They're not saying it was Harry Pride's idea. She says in there that he was approached by another man saying, you should do this.
Does this sound familiar to anyone?
Yeah.
It should.
Because this is kind of what happened to Betty and Barney Hill, the most famous alien abductees. Someone approached them and said, hey, you should use hypnosis. And they ended up doing it. Remember how the only book in Betty Hill's local library was a NICAP book on UFOs? Was that placed there?
Like a plant.
Not only that, but Betty and Barney Hill occurred in September of 1961, the same year as Joe Simonton's encounter.
That is bonkers.
What does this mean?
2 people in the most famous UFO cases, abduction cases, weirdo contactee cases, maybe the most famous ones, somehow were approached by an outside party, unbeknownst to even UFO investigators today, and suggested that hypnosis would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't know who that is. There is somebody who claims that they were part of the hypnosis, and that appears in a later letter. So that was all in September of 1961. In July of 1962, Ray Palmer, who is just this, extremely affluential, basically a UFO publisher guy.
Ray Palmer is the reason that UFOs really popped off around that time.
Yes.
He was a publishing guy. He had all of these like science fiction magazines that he put out. He had issues about flying saucers. He seized on it. The reason that flying saucers were huge was largely in part to Ray Palmer.
Ray Palmer publishes in 1962 in his magazine Flying Saucers that there's a basically what's a letter to the editor from this guy named Frank Patton. Frank Patton claims that he's one of Joe's hypnotists. And this is what he has to say.
We visited Joe several times. Each time we gave him the treatment over and over until he had exact details of a visit from a flying saucer, a request by one of the occupants for water, and a gift from him of the 3 pancakes. Joe really believes he saw those saucers, but it was all hypnotism. We got the idea from noting all the publicity saucer sighters get, and we thought it would be a terrific drawing card for our new park. There you have it. Joe Simonton never saw any flying saucer, no 3 men, one of whom asked for water, no hovering disc that made off at terrific speed. He did receive 3 pancakes made by his hypnotist, and they certainly are not of otherworld origin.
A essential explanation from this mysterious individual named Frank Patton.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know to this day who Frank Patton is. You know who read this article in the 1962 Flying Saucers magazine? None other but the hidden hero of our story, Mr. Judge Carter.
I'm going to say he probably didn't like what he read, did he?
No. He was so upset by this.
Oh, poor Judge.
That he then writes a response letter and an article in Timothy Beckley's magazine about UFOs.
So much drama.
Where he essentially dismisses the whole thing. He says, no, I know Harry Pride. I've lived in this area my whole life. There's no way he could hypnotize someone. Not only that, I know every single hypnotist who lives in the tri-state area. None of them were around. None of them talked to me about Joe. And Joe
he brags about being in the Brotherhood of Magicians in this letter too, by the way. I know my stuff.
He's basically saying, I'm the guy. You can't lie.
You're not the guy.
Fool me. Yeah.
I'm the guy.
I
know
just
everyone.
came back from the hypnotist convention
He
and no
literally
one knew
said
me
that.
there.
That is
So good.
pretty much what he said. And so he's so upset that this letter is getting out there and the news is being perpetrated that Joe is hypnotized because Joe's become one of his close friends and he's kind of become Joe's like public-facing dude around this whole story. And so he thinks that it is the local real estate agent, Cecile Hess, and possibly maybe even Harry Pride as well, but probably just Cecile, perpetrating it for whatever reason to continue to drum up interest in the town and interest in the story.
Jeez.
But he says, no, Joe wasn't hypnotized. The truth is still out there.
You were trying to find a way around that, weren't you?
Yeah.
Joe at one point gave an interview where he said 3 military men came to his door. And we don't exactly know who they were. Maybe he was talking about Hynek and the two graduate students.
Possible he was confused and said that. But he did talk about 3 uniformed men coming to his door, and there's no official record that I've seen. I don't know if you've seen.
No.
Uniformed
about that
men
visitation
would imply that it wasn't the graduate students.
Yeah.
It
And-
sounds
and
like an early Men in Black report to
Kind
me.
of, yeah.
Was Joe Simonton hypnotized to cover up whatever he actually saw?
with a more ridiculous story.
We kind of came to that conclusion with Betty and Barney.
Mm-hmm.
And now I never expected us to come to that conclusion in this.
I guess like Joe seems harder to fake if you're like trying to put over a big ruse.
Yeah,
on a
like
guy.
we're talking about like some people in the road stopping them. They get out and get onto a craft, right? But Joe's watching like something come out of the sky, land in his backyard, and then fly out back into the sky again.
Well, you'll notice if you look at Betty and Barney, it wasn't until after their hypnosis session that the description of what they saw actually changed a little bit.
Yes.
Because originally, Barney, who had served in World War II, said that these looked like German military men that he saw. They were kind of moving like German military men. One of them was wearing like what looked like a motorcycle helmet or a motorcycle hat, like a leather hat. One of them had a cape on.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like that could very easily be a hypnosis cover.
Sure.
What if what Joe Simonton saw was like a helicopter or something, and they put this hypnosis cover on him because he was part of some weird psyop too?
Yeah.
Or they dropped something in the yard.
Yeah.
Some kind of secret like aircraft or something.
He said it sounded like a jet.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. That freaks me out a little bit.
It's very strange.
Because it fits this new profile that we keep seeing in these cases when we actually begin to research them.
There's a clinical kind of, I don't know, they use very clinical words for describing it too. They call it the treatment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's sort of a strange way to describe.
And somebody we don't know suggested the whole thing to these guys.
Yeah.
And then in that one letter, you'll notice they said they probably thought they were doing their patriotic duty.
Yeah.
That would imply to me that they were covering something up.
Yeah.
That people weren't supposed to know about.
It's a very suspicious detail that kind of, even in all of this kind of new information, it would almost even be easy to overlook, but it definitely shouldn't be because that's a very specific usage of word and it feels bizarre to have it kind of just shoehorned in there.
This was not supposed to be this serious of an episode.
I know. We're supposed to talk about pancakes.
I don't know if I kind of believe Judge Carter, honestly. And him saying, like, Harry Pride would never do that.
Yeah.
That's insane. What are you talking about? She's a liar. She's making it up for some reason. But that doesn't mean that nobody else could have hypnotized him either.
It's just a weird, really weird detail.
Yeah.
Like, that seems like a very strange thing to just be like, oh, he was hypnotized. Was that the first place anyone would ever jump to? It just seems so weird. It seems so out of left field.
Yeah.
We've come to a lot of like interesting conclusions, but there's still a lot of questions left. And I think we should take a second and kind of like see where we all sit on this. We've learned a lot of stuff. I know more about this case than I ever have.
Yeah.
I think people listening are probably learning stuff they've never heard before. The hypnosis thing is crazy to me still. What do you think these pancakes were? How did he get these things? Did he make them in a fugue state? Did he have these given to him during a hypnosis session? Where did these things come from? Because these are not normal pancakes. Like, you kind of have to try to make them this up.
Yeah. I don't. So my thought is this. I think that Joe is a great example of someone who had a very strange experience and who was surrounded by people who had agendas.
That seems to be the case in a lot of these types of stories.
Joe is the only person in this entire story who doesn't seem to have any kind of an agenda in terms of like what his experience was all about. And all that I can do, I think, at the end of this is go back to his experience and the sincerity of it and think this man had some kind of a strange experience.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if it was induced by hypnosis. I don't know if it was something that he actually experienced, but I think that he legitimately believes that he had an experience that was probably UFO in nature, probably aliens. Like, because the thing is, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is a man who had this experience, and then the rest of it is just people fighting with each other because of jealousy or internal bullshit or whatever it is. But it still doesn't explain really what this man went through. And I think that he seems pretty honest. So I'm going to say, in my opinion, I think that he legitimately had a strange experience.
I think one of the interesting things that comes up is Gray Barker saying that he believed that Simonton had a psychic experience and that people continuously added on to that experience.
Yeah.
I believe that a lot of experiences people have with the supernatural are somewhat psychic in nature. I've gone into this before, but I believe people's stories. They can only experience them through their own lens.
Yeah.
You know, two people standing next to each other can both have a paranormal experience that is much, much different than one another. And I think a lot of that is because the mechanism by which we experience these things is our mind. And I think that our minds, as we can see through things like hypnosis, being in geomagnetic anomalies, even like certain brainwave states that you're in, drug-induced states, you can have experiences that feel very, very real and affect you in a very real way, even if objectively the situation isn't what you experienced. Maybe that happened to him. Maybe he did have some kind of strange experience. Maybe something popped in and gave him some pancakes. Maybe he was in a fugue state. Maybe that experience was given to him mentally, and while he was cooking or having lunch or whatever. Who knows? All I know is that he seems very sincere. He believes what he experienced, and he was convincing enough that very, very skeptical men whose only job was to debunk this stuff said that they believed that he believes it. That's really all we can get. That's the farthest we can get with it.
Yeah. It's sort of one of those situations that has like a choose your own ending, because you can decide he was hypnotized or he had a legitimate UFO experience, whatever, side you land on. I think the thing to remember is that Joe's story is very sincere, and he seemed to be someone who in his own community was very trusted and thought of as like a good person.
Yeah.
So why would a good person lie about something like that, especially if they had no interest in it at all, even kind of after the experience?
And
you know what I mean?
Barely capitalized on it.
Yeah, like sold a couple, pamphlets.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that he had a strange experience, and maybe it was a psychic one, and that is the entire foundation of the experience itself. But I don't think he was lying. I think he actually had some kind of a strange experience.
What do you think, Connor? You've had your nose in this information for the past few days. Like, what do you think?
This is a really tough one to reach a conclusion on, because, as you said, really skeptical men said that they believe that Joe believes. Now, I see bits and pieces of what could be added into a delusion by Joe. Whether it's some sort of waking dream or something like that, I'm not sure. Things like he was a plumber. There's something about going to fetch water and seeing these cylindrical pipes on the side of the UFO.
Oh, that's interesting, Connor.
Detail. That's good, Connor. Yeah.
Little moments where I'm like, well, this was in Joe's head.
Yeah.
And in his sort of mental space. I do think he was, lonely and lived 5 miles out of town, and it's kind of sketchy out there, and who knows. But there is no incentive for him to want to talk about this.
Yeah.
There's nothing. At the end of the day, Joe did experience something, but I think that it got pretty confused and muddled inside of his head somehow, and then locked in.
Yeah.
It kind of makes sense.
The thing that I really like about this story is this I think just shows what kind of a guy Simonton was. Whether you believe the story objectively or not, he tells of 3 men from outer space who come down into his yard and they ask for water, and he immediately goes and does it. No malice.
Yeah, he's so kind.
He's not scared of them.
Yeah.
He gives them his water. He tries to initiate a conversation with them.
He even eats their food that they offer him.
He eats their food. He doesn't want to be rude.
He doesn't want to be rude at all. Yeah, exactly.
Like Joe's exactly the kind of guy, like if your tire breaks down, like you want him there. To handle the situation and to just be a nice, helpful man for you if you needed. So they picked the right yard to come down in. But no, I don't think that there's that experience in the way that he tells it happened to him. I will say that in terms of the canonical UFO timeline, to me, this is the last innocent contactee case.
Yeah.
Because it started in 47, and then all throughout the 50s, there's some really friendly spacemen.
The Space Brothers.
The Space Brothers that come down, and we can name names and contactees all over the place. But this was right before Betty and Barney Hill became public. Literally 6 months before Betty and Barney Hill happened.
And that was the first real scary
That's when they got scary. They got scary. They slowly started to become more scary and less contactee-ish throughout the 60s. And then by the 70s and 80s, they were the scary grays.
And now everybody's talking about how they're demons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe Simonton did have the last cool, good experience with an alien.
Yeah.
I think it can happen again.
We got to change our mindsets.
But we have to change the mindset.
Yeah.
We got to be more like Joe.
Yes. Joe is the emissary that I want the extraterrestrials to have. You know, not the guy who's saying, well, these things are demonic and they're here to harvest our souls.
Yeah. Yes.
Frankly.
What do you think, Keelin?
I definitely agree with all of you. I think Joe experienced something, whether we can determine what that was, who knows. Where I'm really thinking about is like the hypnotism, where it's like, if there was hypnotism, these like real estate guys, it had to have been someone else's idea, because no way these guys are like, oh yeah, we'll get silly Joe to tell a story. Let's hypnotize him. Instead of just asking some guy to lie, like just hire an actor. Like,
yeah, you're right. That's what Disneyland is known for.
Yeah.
It's for fantasies, making fantasies reality. Everybody knows there's a real guy in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're costumes.
Yeah. I mean, like, now that you said that, Keelin, I'm thinking, like, does Joe even seem like the right candidate for something like this? Like, would they have gone like, all right, everyone in town, like, who's going to be the one which guy is going to be the one? Like, Joe doesn't even seem like the right person to be, like, you would think that it would be the judge of all people.
Yeah, of course.
Why wouldn't it have been him? He would have been the perfect guy to do that.
I mean, we've seen the videos of Joe telling this story. He's not particularly entertaining.
No, yeah,
when
exactly.
he's telling this. Like,
True.
And then, well, I gave him my salute. What am I going to do?
he's
That's a
just
good
like,
point.
yeah.
Very
and then,
matter of fact.
Yeah.
And then I was just standing there, and what else are you gonna do? It's like, I don't know if I'd love to see that at like fake Disneyland.
No, yeah, that's
You're
a
right.
really good point.
I think that something happened to Joe. I hate to be as conspiratorial as Greg.
Wait, what are you talking about? What do you mean?
Something happened to Joe, but he stumbled onto something that he wasn't supposed to see.
I think that's the
kinda.
only way that the Disneyland theory makes sense.
And it was covered up.
He saw something he wasn't supposed to see, the same way that I believe Betty and Barney did, or they were purposefully chosen to make fools out of them for some reason.
Yeah.
And because of that, they gave him some kind of cover story, and that was that. And then
Yeah.
it was silly. It was pancakes from outer space.
Yeah, it was goofball stuff.
No one's going to ever take this seriously.
But then in some back documents, hypnotism gets involved. The Fae got involved accidentally for a long time. Salt and the tests and it's quite a convoluted story.
Honestly, like on the back end, when you really look at it from that perspective, it has a malevolence to it too. When you think about the idea that this poor man possibly was hypnotized 29 times against his will to believe this story seems so awful. Like, it's so terrible when you really think about it.
Well, that's a real sad note to end it on.
Yeah, you might want we can take that part out.
there is one last article here. There's one last article here. This is from the Chicago Daily News, November 22nd, 1961.
Exactly 2 years before Kennedy was murdered.
No.
I'm trying to bring this back up.
Sorry. Keep going.
We're talking about pancakes here.
This article's titled, Tells of Pancake Landing by Flippant Flying Saucer. Little men swap jug refill for flapjack, says Wisconsinite. That's a hell of a title. I don't care whether people believe me or not, Simonton said, after selling 27 printed copies of his story at $1 each to persons who attended the meeting in Mathin's Seafood Restaurant in Waukegan. He said he gave 3 of the pancakes to the Air Force and kept 1. When asked by a reporter for a bite of the pancake, Simonton said, "Absolutely not. If I didn't have this pancake to show, I'm sure people would have me in a cuckoo house." He allowed the reporter to touch the pancake. It felt like an old pancake.
It's so perfect.
Somehow that's like the perfect conclusion to this story. we'll never know the answer about what exactly happened to Joe Simonton unless some like crazy military document gets declassified and we find out he was hypnotized because he saw a secret test or some weird thing like that. We'll never know. All we know is that something happened to Joe that really affected him and he believed it. And then that little story that happened in the backyard of this little place in Eagle River, Wisconsin, hits the AP Newswire. Everybody has their own opinion about it. Jacques Vallée seizes on it, and they become something even bigger than anyone ever anticipated they would. And it becomes the canonical source for every tale that's retold about this space pancake. And I don't even know if our podcast will change people's minds about that. It's too late. It's out there. The pancakes have been eaten. There's no taking it back. They're out there. And that's why the space pancake is a haunted object.
The Haunted Objects podcast is hosted by Greg and Dana Newkirk, produced by Connor J. Randall, with cinematography and editing by Carl Pfeiffer, and features exclusive artifacts from the Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal. To learn more about the artifacts featured in this episode, take part in live interactive experiments, and enjoy exclusive Haunted Objects content, become a museum member at patreon.com/paramuseum. This has been a Planet Weird production for Spectre Vision Radio.
You know what I realized as you did that?
What?
What goes like this? Normally, if you're like,
Yeah.
I'm eating,
Yeah.
it's this.
This. Is it like...
It's like a ventriloquist puppet.
Oh my God, Connor.
Whoa.
Connor, the pipes thing freaks me out a little bit. Because that's
Weird
like the
stuff in
thing,
his
like
brain, man.
it's like all of the things are prompts that would have come from his subconscious
Oh my
mind.
God, Connor.
Water.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Like going to fetch water. The ship would look like it had pipes in it. Like it's
And
very
he had-
weird.
And he had just put his dishes in his sink, and the ship looked like two bowls.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah.
That's true.
That's so true.
Weird, man.
It's a puzzle. It's a jigsaw puzzle created out of all of these things in his recent subconscious for some reason.
That's so weird. I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah. Anyway.
Huh.
Enjoy that one, everybody. Thank you.